Today, I am at the Ayn Rand Institute interviewing its executive director, Yaron Brook, on the topic of the bin Laden event, what happened and what does it mean. Yaron has for a long time been my expert in geopolitical questions, military, foreign policy, economics. In other words, you could say the division of labor is he covers reality and I cover philosophy. I want to start, Yaron, by discussing some facts, just what happened and why, basically why. And then I want to go into different reactions that I've seen. To begin with, bin Laden was supposedly captured by enhanced interrogation of a courier, if I understand. And that, in this case, meant waterboarding. And there's been a big uproar about that. Can you tell us what that is and whether you think that's moral?
So waterboarding is where you dunk somebody's head under the water, give them the sense that they are drowning, cause them to panic. You pull them out of the water, you let them breathe a little bit, and then dunk their head back into the water. I think this is enhanced interrogation methods, which I think is a politically correct term for torture. I think this is clearly torture. And I think it's moral to do in certain circumstances, that it is moral to do it in war. It is moral to do when lives of people are at stake and when the person you're interrogating is not providing information that would save those lives voluntarily. It not only is moral to do, I think it is an moral imperative to do. That is, if you are responsible for the lives of American troops or American civilians, and you have such a terrorist in your hands, such a murderer in your hands, and he is not providing you with information, it is your moral responsibility to do whatever it takes to get that information to him. It is your job to protect the lives of Americans.
All right, let me ask you in terms of its misuse. You hear a lot that this kind of enhanced interrogation or torture is not just in an occasional case, but a general policy carried out in many cases illegitimately by sadists, by people who don't really need anything special. Is that, obviously you don't know all the cases, but do you have reason to believe that as a general policy, this is carried out of bad motives?
No, I have no reason to believe that. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that this kind of interrogation is carried out willy-nilly on anybody they capture. I think they're quite selective and quite careful. I will say this, I have no doubt that the enemy regimes and that the enemy is conducting this randomly, and that many of the regimes in the Middle East, friendly, so-called friendly, or unfriendly, do this regularly. But I do not believe that the American CIA or the American military are sadists. And if there is a case here and then it should be prosecuted. I mean, there's plenty of means and mechanisms by which legal means by which people being interrogated can be protected and should be protected if this is done inappropriately.
So this is at least one crime that the American government is not guilty of. It's difficult to find many more. Now, let me ask you about the fact that the SEALs killed bin Laden, made no attempt to capture him alive, as I understand it. There were stories coming out at first that it was impossible because he had a gun, he had a woman who was hostage shielding him, but all of those were then disavowed. And I read somewhere that Obama specifically said, kill him on sight. They did not want to capture him. Now, there are many reasons why I could challenge that, but I want to ask you whether the following is part of the truth in terms of one consequence being the vast amount of information that we lost as a result of that. I'd like to quote you this. Who is this guy? I think his name is Yu. And I saw this in a paper I have in front of me. I think it's the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. Bin Laden was still issuing direct instructions and funds to a broad terrorist network and would have known where and how to find other key al-Qaeda players. his capture, like Saddam Hussein's in December 2003, would have provided invaluable intelligence. First of all, do you think that's true?
I don't think there's any question that's true. I think that Bin Laden knew everything. It turns out that he was a micromanager. He knew where people were. He had valuable information. Now, it's true they did get a lot of computer disks and files, and all that's valuable. But if they could have got this information directly from Bin Laden, I think we would have got an unimaginable amount of information about Al Qaeda and who, for example, who in the Pakistani government and who in the Pakistani military and secret service were helping him. He would have been able to reveal all that. Now, the question is, why did they kill him?
Yeah, why did they do that?
And I don't think this is unique to Obama. I think Bush would have killed him as well. I think they killed him because they were afraid of. They didn't know what to do with him. If they would have brought him to the United States or Guantanamo, they would have had to use enhanced interrogation methods. Obama is on record against these methods. What would they have done? Offered him coffee and tea and asked him nice questions? He would have never said anything.
And then there would have been the outrage from
the
Muslims.
Outrage from the Muslim world. There would have been outrage from the radical left in the United States. There would have been outrage from Europe. There would have been pressure. There would have been a claim that there were going to be terrorist attacks and hostage takings in order to try to get him back. Now, if I were running things, I think I would have taken him alive, used whatever methods necessary to get as much information from him as possible. And then I would have had a quick military trial, sentenced him to death, and made the execution a public execution, and made it very clear, this is what is done to people who kill Americans.
What about the idea that if you buried him anywhere, there would be a shrine, and Muslims all over would come, and he would help to, motivate and activate?
Then don't bury him. Burn him, burn him and spread his ashes everywhere. But the idea of making a Muslim burial, of treating this person with even an iota of respect as if he is a human being, is monstrous. The idea that they gave him a Muslim burial, if it's true, is horrific and monstrous. He did not deserve it. Shouldn't be treated as a human being. He should have been executed publicly, and they should have burnt him and spread his ashes.
But it's not only as a human being, but it's tantamount as to hanging Tojo in World War II, according to Japanese rules. When we just had so many Americans slaughtered.
No, it's showing respect to a person and to an ideology that is responsible for the death of Americans, thousands of Americans, and people who are still planning the deaths of more thousands of Americans.
And this was also true in Obama's victory speech, which is so acclaimed. He went out of his way to say, of course, Muslims are not responsible for this. It's men from Mars, masquerading.
And this is now a tradition, unfortunately, since Bush did this right after 9/11, where he advocated that Islam is a religion of peace and invited Muslims to celebrate the Ramadan in the White House. I think Obama is significantly worse in his attempt to appease the Muslim world.
What is Bush's psychology or political strategy in sucking up to the people right on the heels of a nationwide uproar?
This was right after
9/11.
Right after 9/11.
Why?
I think this is...
Roosevelt did not do that. He was not exactly a nice guy.
No, but this guy was a compassionate conservative. I think that he would have found it, because of his religion, I think he would have found it an affront to religion to blame a religion, no matter whether that was Islam or any other religion. But I also think that he is American culture, unfortunately, is now a consequence of this multiculturalism, of this notion that we as Americans are nothing special, that we are nothing special as a culture. That we can't condemn other cultures, we can't condemn other religions, we can't condemn other people en masse, because there's nothing special about us.
Do you think that's taken root in the public in general, or a good part of it?
I think that's absolutely right. Self-assertion is unheard of. I mean, the idea that George Bush was radical or self-assertive or a cowboy, is so ludicrous. And as I think you stated at the time, if FDR had said that the Shinto religion was a religion of peace and most Japanese love Americans and so on, he would have been impeached. There would have been rioting in the streets in the 1940s. And the fact that George Bush was considered at the time so strong and assertive is, I think, an indication of the fact that Americans today are soft. They have bought into this multiculturalist agenda. And the fact that there isn't an uproar about Obama's foreign policy is just further suggestion of the same thing.
I ask you a question. I understand all that, but what I don't understand is why isn't there a voice, some columnist somewhere who talks about all the intelligence, just that. I don't expect them to have morality or whatever, but just as a factual issue. I don't see. Did you ever see or hear a comment from anybody?
Well, there was you, as you said, who was in the Wall Street Journal. But I think it's because they don't have the moral argument. The moral argument is what gives you the backbone to be able to say that this is what should be done, and it's okay to torture. How can you say it's okay to torture when you don't have a moral foundation for that statement? And it's only egoism and self-interest that gives you that kind of moral foundation. These guys can't do it because they're committed at whatever level it is to an ideology of altruism.
Okay, so I just want to review what you said you would do if you were handing it. You capture him, bring him over here, subject him to enhanced interrogation until you were completely satisfied, hang him publicly in front of the White House, right?
Yep.
And then set fire to him, cremate him, and throw him over like the Aral Sea or some place in the Hudson River, some place that no one has no. That's what I would do. I would do worse, but I'll never have the power, so it doesn't matter. Now, I guess this is already answered. They threw the body at sea for the same reason, I guess. Although they don't have a dead body, they wouldn't have to put in Guantanamo. So why couldn't they bring the body home? It's also be a shrine? Or?
It's this idea of a shrine. It's idea then that whatever ceremony they have is documented in public. They wanted to do this on the quiet. They wanted to get rid of it. They didn't want to talk about it. They wanted to be able to say they did a Muslim ceremony, but they didn't want to broadcast a Muslim ceremony. Yeah. They want to have their cake and eat it too.
And that's the same reason he's keeping the pictures, right, from the public.
Yeah, it's keeping the pictures, is not to show kind of the brutality of it and not to turn him supposedly into a martyr and that he goes up on the wit. It's cowardice. This administration is an administration of cowards. It's an administration of appeasement, and it's an administration, as I think Obama's going to speak in a few days, to the Muslim world. I mean, there's another one. Where right after killing bin Laden, he's going to address the Muslim world. And in that talk, he's going to, again, try to appease them, try to moderate them, try to tell them how wonderful we are and how we want to be, their friends and how inherently peaceful Islam really is.
But Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal was upset about this, and her point was that it was ridiculous, that's my word, not hers, not to release the pictures even, because she said, what world does he think we're living in today? She said, 50% of the world, as soon as the government says something is A, concludes that it's not A. So why should we even be convinced that he's done anything to bin Laden if he cuts off all evidence, all possible evidence, and orders everyone involved to provide no evidence?
Well, I mean, I think even if he'd released the pictures, just like even though he released his birth certificate, people will claim that it's doctored, that it's fake. There's always going to be
people, but aren't more people entitled to wonder?
I think there's too much risk here in pretending that he's dead. Even Al Qaeda and the Taliban now have come out and admitted that bin Laden is dead. I think it's silly not to release the pictures, and again, it's a sign of this cowardice and not to rub it in their faces, I think. But I don't think there's a credible case to be made that he's not dead. But that's not going to prevent the conspiracy theories, and it's not going to prevent, particularly in the Middle East, which is ripe with conspiracy theories, for people to claim that, bin Laden was, in the Middle East, they claim bin Laden was really working for the CIA. And this is, now the Americans are taking him back.
No, I don't believe it's true. But what is interesting to me is that a large part of the world, including the country, believe that Obama is capable of what Hitler called the big lie.
Yep.
Not just, a little lie, but a massive falsehood. And according to her, half the world believes that.
Do you
think that's true?
I think certainly the Middle East believes it. I don't know how many Americans. I still think it's a fringe within America who believes in this kind of a big lie.
Okay, well, let us conclude part one of our interview here. And next time, we'll go into the reactions to the bin Laden situation.